We have some big changes on the way heading into next week as the strongest cold front of the season looks to move in. That's going to bring some big snows. Plus, the tropics look to be active again, and we could be yet looking at another possible storm heading into the Gulf of Mexico. So let's break down the details for you going forward. Here is this week. So this is what I would refer to as transitional week. It's going to be still another milder week ahead for much of the lower 48, but notice the ridging is going to be building over the top in Canada. That's an extremely warm air mass for this time of year, and much of the country is still going to be on the mild side and the much warmer side, but all this is going to start building, and I think big time changes are going to be on the table heading into next week. So if you look at the precipitation, here's the systems as they move across. It's going to be a fairly fast movers this week. We're still going to get the systems coming in from the Pacific Northwest. It's going to continue to be on the wet side like it normally is this time of year across the Pacific Northwestern coast. And then as they enter parts, the middle part of the country, by the time we head into Wednesday and Thursday, we are going to have a little bit of a low pressure center form over Oklahoma, as well as into Kansas, back into Arkansas, getting back into Missouri again with more rain, some stronger storms with that activity. And then further as they progress later on into the week through Mississippi, back into Alabama, as well as into the western areas of Tennessee. And then as they progress further off to the east, they are going to be producing lighter rain showers. They finally got some rain up there in the Northeast yesterday, but for the week ahead, I'm not really looking too much activity from Florida all the way up the East Coast into the Northeast. But I think all that changes heading into next week with that ridging that's going to be building over the top in much of Canada and the week ahead. We talked about this yesterday in the National Hurricane Center is now on board with it. Now a 40% probability of those lowering pressures down there into the Caribbean. Yet we could be looking at another potential storm. If it gets named, it would take the name Sarah. But yes, this is the same area down here that's favorable for tropical development this time of year is the Caribbean. Those temperatures are still in the 90-degree range down there, and they have the highest deep ocean water content as well. So it's the greatest probability if you're going to see something in the month of November, this is likely where it's going to be coming from. But as it starts to build, we could be looking at yet another formidable storm. So here is the ensembles on the European. This heads into Sunday. This would be Sunday. Yes, that's 100% probability we could be having yet another tropical depression down there into the Caribbean. This is Jamaica. This would be the Cayman Islands. Yes, that is 100% probability by the time we head into Sunday on the European ensembles guidance, saying, hey, we could be looking at pretty some bullish conditions and yet another storm. Here is the GFS ensembles, kind of the same deal. We have about 60% of the members right now on Sunday saying, hey, we've got a lot of low pressure forming down there into the Caribbean. We've got ridging over the top. We've got a pretty ideal setup for tropical development because we can have all that warm air still in the lower 48. Yes, we could be looking at a named storm by then, taking the name Sarah, of course. And then where is it going to go? So let's head further north and set the stage for next week. So we've got a lot of cold air that's going to be building up there in Alaska, right? So temperatures most of the week are actually going to be below zero up there into Alaska. And, sometimes single digits below, sometimes, double digits below, but very cold air. And typically what happens is as the cold air builds into Alaska, it takes about 7 to 10 days to push it further south. And that's exactly what it's likely going to unfold. We really haven't had like a strong cold front for fall standards. And this would likely be, unfortunately, definitely very late this year, a strong cold front finally coming in with a significant push of colder air going to be building out west. So here's the setup. So we've got the ridging over the top. Look at the blocking that's going to be taking place over Greenland. That's a dominant ridge of high pressure highlighted over Greenland. That's what fuels the storm and sets the lower pressures underneath down there in the Caribbean. There's the warm surge still for the central and eastern 2/3 of the U.S., but there's the cold air finally releasing down there up into Alaska. That puts the colder anomalies up here into the Pacific Northwest, drops it into the western regions, drops it into the desert Southwest, and then as the blocking starts to take shape, we'll start to increase and pull more cold air and starts to block some of that colder air. So once it starts to enter the central US, there's a little bit colder air behind the system, because I think what the blocking is going to start to come to fruition by the time we head into middle of next week. So here's the setup for Monday. We've got the low pressure center going to be diving down all the way down into the Baja of California. That tells you it's pretty significant. We're going to have yet another fairly significant low pressure, an upper level low that will be building. That's the one that dumped all the feet of snow happening in New Mexico and much of Colorado there in the Texas Panhandle. They're going to get yet another system likely to form. At the same time, we'll be watching what comes out of the Caribbean. So the latest GFS is fairly bullish on this, would take it down to a 997 just off the Central America, and there is Cancun. And there are indications this could end up back into the Gulf of Mexico by the time we head into the middle of next week. So here's Monday night. So this would be Monday night. We've got a formidable low pressure center that's going to be forming. We could be looking at more rain opportunities coming back in the picture in portions of Texas and Oklahoma. A formidable low pressure highlighted over Kansas, with snow flying on the backside again into New Mexico, much of Colorado again, but the cold air is going to build. So you have the warm sector on the eastern side, you got the cold sector on the western side, the cold side of the storm. And as it continues to build and move across, and the building, the ridging over the top with the blocking over the top, that's going to keep allowing that some of that colder air to continue to funnel down from Alaska and into the lower 48, back into those western regions, and tap into some of that fuel across the middle part of the country. So you'll have the rain on the front end ending with snow on the back end across areas across the central portions of the US. So here is the setup by Wednesday. I think a lot of this is going to unfold as we head into Wednesday of next week, because we've got a dominant ridge of high pressure they're going to be building. That's the two culprits that's going to help keep lower pressures. And then with the dynamics of this progression of west to east, it's likely going to be pulling this system further north and then a further northeast. So yes, that could be yet another tropical system down there into the Gulf of Mexico heading into Wednesday afternoon. This would be November 20th, guys, November 20th time frame, as we've got colder air coming in the central US, and look at the blocking that starts to take shape over the top. And that's something we haven't actually seen so far this fall, but that definitely looks to come to fruition heading in the next week. We're going to have a formidable low pressure center, another one actually form on the backside. That's the much colder push coming in from the northwest, as Arctic air builds in from the northwest and kind of builds back into Montana by then, and colder air moves in across the central US. We've got rain on the front end, and then snow, heavy snow is going to fall on the back end. And some of this could be accumulated some fairly decent big time snows. And looking at the ensembles, this is your European. Here's your European ensembles. Of course, the GFS is bullish. The European is also bullish. These are the overall ensembles. We got a lot of members saying, hey, we got a lot of low pressure center happening down there into the Gulf of Mexico. So there's multiple models now saying, hey, we could be having another late season storm down there into the Gulf. But this one may have more impact to the United States, because in fact, we do have a cold front that's coming in from the west to the east, and that could spell the stage for trouble. So next week looks to be busy. So this week is more of a transitional week, kind of gearing up for next week. But next week definitely looks like very active. We've got a possible storm heading into the Gulf. We've got an Arctic air coming in from the northwest, and we've got snow flying in the middle part of the country. So it definitely looks to be a more active week heading in the next week. And the cold air will build and follow that initial push of colder air. So it looks to last a while as well once it starts to unload across the central part of the U.S. So by Thursday, we'll be watching a lot of activity. Wednesday and Thursday, that seems to be a crucial day. We could have a storm down there into the Gulf of Mexico. We've got the rain on the front end. We got the low pressure highlighted over Kansas and portions of Missouri. And then all this would likely be snow on the backside from the Texas Panhandle through western areas of Kansas, through portions of Nebraska, getting into South Dakota. Eventually that would likely swing into Iowa as well as into Minnesota by the time we head to say that Wednesday and Thursday. And of course, this is by the middle of next week. So this is a ways out, folks. This is a ways out, but yes, definitely appears to be a lot of dynamics starting to come together and say, hey, we could have some big time snows next week and a formidable low pressure down there into the Gulf of Mexico, and rain on the front end, followed by the much colder air mass. Because look at this, that's a 1062 high pressure, right? We haven't seen that this fall. So you know that's some colder air. That's likely some below zero air building up there into Montana. And that pulls further south into the Central Plains. Much of Texas, much of the Deep South will start to feel the effects of this colder blast of air. And while at the same time, the Southeast and portions of Florida may be dealing with what may be to come out of the Caribbean by then. So yes, looks like to be a very active week, but nonetheless, we could be looking at the snow continuing to fly over Nebraska, Iowa, Minnesota, and eventually by Thursday, possibly heading into Wisconsin. You've got the rain on the south side and the 1041 low pressure building in by then into Colorado. That will eventually pull the colder air down there into Texas. But overall, it kind of looks like this. I mean, once this sets up, right? So we'll have blocking over the top. So that does two things with that blocking over the top this week. That's going to help lower the pressures to fuel that storm down there into the Caribbean. That's why I think we definitely have a possibility to have yet another named storm, which would be Sarah. But it's also, once this builds in, is going to trap the colder air over a period of time. And much of next week, basically from Wednesday all the way through Monday, we could be looking at well below average temperatures down there into the south as the coldest air of the season finally makes its way down there into the south and changes the overall pattern that we haven't seen, because we obviously had a very mild September, October, and portions of much of November has been pretty mild. So this is definitely going to be the strongest cold front of the season so far we've seen. So I'll definitely keep you well ahead of the storm. I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video, definitely hit the subscribe button, and catch me next update where I protect you before and after the storm.